Hi guys, this is Tanya in the studio again, in my very messy studio. Um, once again, I apologize. I'm not a videographer by any means, but I'm doing the best I can. So, anyway, I just want to go over one of the foundation principles in drawing the figure. You've got to learn the skeleton, and that's why I have Sam here to help us out. He's a very able teaching assistant. He's very helpful in that way. He's got a few issues though. He's got a screwdriver in his head. You can probably see there. I lost the proper thingy to go in there, so he doesn't mind. It's okay. So anyway, I want to talk about this foundation on which the muscles and the flesh is laid. If you understand what's underneath the flesh of the figure, it's going to give you much more information, and you're going to get things in a much more effective way as we proceed. And once you have this kind of idea of the shape of the bones, where they are, why they are, and how the muscles are laid on top of those bones, which comes later. It's just so helpful. I can't stress that enough. So anyway, I'd like to just kind of go from the top to the bottom, and kind of go over some of the major bones here and what they do. This is not medical anatomy by any means, but it is helpful. It's helpful to know too some of the basic names of things. So if I point something out, you can say, "Oh yeah, okay, I know that. I know that one." Okay, and I also would like to encourage you to poke around. Do things like this so you can kind of feel the shape of things in your own body. That's always really helpful, and you don't forget things that way. It sounds strange, but when you have that physical sort of almost muscle memory, um, it goes a long way to helping you remember the placement of things and the shape of things. And in the areas like in the face and the hands, the feet, any place where you can feel a bone sticking out, that is very helpful. So the more you can do that, the better. So let's kind of start with Sam here at the top. You've got the frontal bone here, you've got the occipital bone here, that occipital ridge where the eyebrows are. You can feel that on your own head very easily. Now, that's different depending on different ethnicities, which is interesting, the shape of this orbital bone there. And since we're all mixed up anyway, that I think it would be interesting to see that in the skull. But anyway, and a male person has a thicker occipital ridge than a female. I don't know why that is, but it is a thicker ridge there. I have, ideas about why that might be. Having to hunt and with, going out on the savannah, maybe you need a better, thicker bone right there. I don't know. That's just total conjecture. But anyway, okay, so you have the nasal bone here, right here. You have the zygomatic bone right here. You can feel that. You've got the zygomatic arch right in here, right here, okay? And you can feel that in your own skull. That's an important one to understand where that plane is right there. You have the maxilla and the mandible, jawbone, and you move that jaw and you can feel it. You see this little indentation right in here. Obviously, this is going to be very stilted because you bolted together, so it's not a natural movement, but you can feel it in your own body, which I think is an important thing for you to do. Here you have the temporal bone, you have the occipital bone, you have the parietal bone, You have these fissures. Obviously, those things are um, not fused at birth for obvious reasons. That's also true of the sacrum down here. Anyway, so we have those bones. Anytime you have a fossa, when you see fossa, that's like an indentation or fossil. So you have the canine fossa right here, with the canine teeth. Mine are kind of worn down because I'm old, and they do get worn down after a while. And some people have, you probably noticed, have much more pronounced ones than others. But anyway, understanding these things, and when I do a general reference, when I say condyles or spine, that could be the spine, or it could be just something that, sticks out. Right here you have something called the mental protuberance, which is a very antique term from the last century and also the 1800s. They had these pseudoscience, quack sciences, and they would measure with calipers. They would measure the size of the skull and various things about the physiognomy, and they would make conclusions about how smart people were, how superior certain people were based on those bogus things. And that's where that comes from. All the stuff. I'm a history nerd, so I like all this junk, and I like all the Latin names for various bones because it tells you something about the culture. So anyway, the doctors tend not to like those names because they kind of bias you in one direction or another, so they come up with other names. So when I say one name, there's also other names. There might be several names for one bone. So just to give you a heads up on that. Okay, so let's go down the various bones here. I may not be able to get down all the way to the feet, but I am going to include a photograph of this chart, which is a pretty good one, on D2L so that you can study it. I'm also going to include some software that I bought, which I hope is good. It seems to be good, which I'm hoping to link you into so that you can study those as we go. Okay, so let's go down the body here with Sam. You have these beautiful clavicle bones here, and when you're looking at the clavicles, think about the fact that the clavicles, they have this nice shape to them, okay? They're not flat across, so not a straight line. They have a beautiful shape to them, a kind of an S curve. A lot of these bones, they start out one way and then they turn another way. They might even flatten out. They might even triangulate, depending on the function, depending on what tendons attach, what muscles attach. It's all a beautifully orchestrated, a bit of celestial engineering, as Robert Beverly Hale likes to say. And I'm going to show you Robert Beverly Hale as we go too. He did some brilliant videos, much better than anything I'm doing here. Okay, so you've got the clavicles there. You have the pit of the neck here with the sternum here. I love the Latin name. You have the manubrium and the gladiolus here, right? And the manubrium is the handle, and the gladiolus is the blade, and that comes from these nasty little daggers that the Romans carried, the ancient Romans carried. The soldiers weren't allowed to bring weapons into the city. In fact, I think soldiers might not have even been allowed within the walls. I'm not sure. But I know weapons were not. But people carried these nasty little blades under their togas and stuff, even the women, because Rome was a very dangerous place, especially at night. So anyway, that's where that shape comes from. Now, the sternum, one thing about the sternum, you can see here, we tend to flatten this too much, but in an actual human person, that will come out a bit more than you're seeing here on Sam, because Sam's, like I say, bolted down. So you have this sternum here, the ensiform cartilage here, which you can feel at the pit here of the sternum, at the top of the belly. You see the thoracic arch, which, by the way, is different on everyone. That cartilage is a little bit different. You kind of have an idea about how that thoracic arch looks, though, so you can keep that in your mind when you're drawing. You see the ribs attaching to the sternum here. There are 7 or 8, it depends on the book that you read, what they call true ribs that have their own special cartilage. And then you have these other ribs which attach together to the sternum, but they have to share cartilage. And you have 8 or 10 true ribs, depending on the source. And then you have 2 false ribs in the back here, which just are kind of protective shapes back there. I mean, they're all vital, of course, but you have to think in terms of where these are placed, what they're doing. Obviously, with the cranium, that's protecting something, let's hope. With the rib cage, that's also protecting many vital things. With the pelvis, too, you have this nice protection aspect of the pelvis. So you have those 3, what I call container bones in the skeleton. So keep in mind, what the function of these things are and why they're shaped the way they're shaped. Now, in the human person, that rib cage is going to be a little bit flattened in the front compared to our 4-legged friends. They're going to have a big rib cage because they have the luxury of, being on all fours, so they don't have to stand upright and, have, this incredible balancing act that we have to do all the time. So their rib cage is going to be much different. You can see that on your puppy. If the puppy's, standing up on its hind legs, you see how big that rib cage is. Well, there's a reason for that, obviously. But anyway, so also on the back, it's flattened a bit as well, which gives us the luxury of lying on our back. And once again, standing upright. Now, all of these things function to fight gravity, to propel us up. So these things have evolved and evolved and evolved and become this kind of miraculous thing, which allows us to salsa dance and other things. Not me, but, if you can salsa dance, that's great. So anyway, looking at the shape of these ribs, they do not flatten like this. They have a very delicate curve upward, and I want you to keep that in mind when you're looking at the rib cage. Let's look at the spine now before I get too carried away here. With the spine, you have 7 cervical vertebrae, you have 12 thoracic vertebrae, and you have 7 lumbar vertebrae, okay? Now, looking at the side view of this isn't as exaggerated as it should be, but there's this beautiful curve, this beautiful S curve in the spine, and you should always keep that in mind when you are drawing, because that S curve, no matter how embedded in tissue it is, it will always inform the pose, okay? You have 2 strong cords of muscle on either side of that spine in the back. So all of these things are heavily embedded in things, but it still informs the pose. Our bellies pooch out a little bit. It's because, at least mine does, it's because of that S curve as well. And for me, too much chocolate. But anyway, so you look at that beautiful S curve and you think about why it's curving the way it's curving. It's all about support. It's all about protection. It's all about, how to do this incredible balancing act that we're doing here. So 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, and 7 lumbar. Now I'm going to turn Sam over here so we can look at the back view of his spine. Come on, Sam, don't be shy. And you see this beautiful, it's almost like a Russian nesting dolls there. The way that these things are shaped and how they stack on top of each other. And sometimes they will flare out. Now, always keep in mind as you're going down the body, especially towards the joints, even with the finger joints, those bones are going to get heavier and they're going to flare out because they have to support weight. And they have, there's a lot of stress on the joints So, that's going to be something that you have to keep in mind as you go down the body. Okay, so we've got the spine here. At the top here, we've got the atlas bone, very egocentric sort of thing, Atlas holding up the world, which is a complicated story, which didn't actually happen. But anyway, okay, so you've got the atlas bone, you've got the axis bone, and you've got that seventh cervical vertebrae, which is very important. And you can feel that on yourself, like I'm poking around again on myself. So seventh cervical vertebrae, that's a good indicator right there. If you go to a chiropractor, they often will poke around in that area and count down. Or your spine doctor, if you're being checked for scoliosis or whatever, that seventh cervical is a key there. So anyway, while I'm looking at the back view of Sam here, you've got the scapula, those beautiful wing-like shapes, which can move over the rib cage, are structured in such a way that they allow us to do these wonderful moves. They're kind of like, wings. Think of them in that way. And then, of course, you have the sacrum down here, that beautiful triangulated shape, which you can see in very thin figures. You can also see the little dimples in the back there, and that comes from the sacrum here. Let's turn. Okay, Sam, turn around. Don't fall over, please. There we go. Here's Sam. He's so helpful. Okay, we have the acromion process here on the scapula, and a lot of things will attach to the clavicles, the acromion process. So all of those things are important to know as we continue our study here. You have this beautiful ball and socket joint. These two things form that wonderful little cup there. It's the ball and socket joint, which once again allows you to do this kind of movement. Of course, there's another ball and socket joint that's very prominent on the leg. But let's look at this one now. You have the humerus bone here, which is a very interesting shape in terms of the fact that it is round and then it triangulates, okay? And you also, on this, you have, let me get this in camera here, not a professional. I'm going to turn him around. No, actually, I'll just do this. Okay, so you have this ulna bone here, which is like a beak. It hooks in to the condyles right here on the humerus. So you have this kind of beak bone on the ulna, and the condyles of the humerus and the beak bone of the ulna form that elbow shape, okay, that you can see. And you also need to look here at the radius, which is a heavier bone, and the radius is what it purports to do, okay? It's on the thumb side, and you have this nice turn. So the radius is going over the ulna, okay? The radius goes over the ulna. You can see it probably on Sam a little bit better, okay? So do that in your own body, and you can feel that turn in your lower arm there. Okay, while we're here, let's look at the beautiful hands, okay? Our miraculous hands. That's crooked. Sam has dirty hands. He's not practicing good hygiene. You have the carpals. You have 7 carpals here that are kind of like irregular ball bearings that allow you to do all this incredible stuff. I'm going to move this a bit because I'm not catching everything here. All right. Okay, you've got the carpals here. 7 carpals. You have the metacarpals, which meta means beyond in Latin, okay? And then you have the phalanges, our fingers. And our fingers actually come here, all right? They're here. That's where our phalanges start. You have the webbing here, and so we think the fingers are here where the webbing is, but they're not. It's here, okay, where that knuckle is. And this area here is going to be an important sighting tool when you start drawing the hand, okay? So think in terms of the phalanges, the fingers starting there. All right. Okay. So pelvis, Elvis the pelvis. Um, the pelvis, I like to find shape, um, common shape forms to mentally remember more complicated forms, and that's always helpful in drawing the figure. Just like finding geometric forms to help you understand more complicated forms, simple geometric forms. I always see these as kind of like elephant ears or something when I'm looking at the pelvis, and also this heart shape here. In the pelvis there, kind of a reference to Venus in a way. But anyway, you have the anterior superior iliac spine here. Uh, that's just a point, okay? And anterior superior, that just is a fancy way of saying the front part of the pelvis, okay? And also, when you're looking at the ridge here, it's tricky when you start turning the pelvis, okay? Because you're going to be seeing mostly the ridge on this side and the interior part of the pelvis on this side. You could spend weeks refining your understanding of the pelvis. Really, I know that sounds weird, but there's so much to learn. This is the pubis symphysis. That's the coming together of these bones, and obviously in the female skeleton, this happens to be a male because they're more common, and I guess they're cheaper. So you have to request a female skeleton. Who knew? Anyway, so the female pelvis is going to be wider, obviously. The bones are more flexible and a bit thinner, and interestingly enough, a little more shallow, which also allows some flexibility there in the pelvis. You're going to get to be an expert, so you'll be able to tell the difference between a female skeleton and a male skeleton, okay? So anyway, and also, I don't know if I told you this at the beginning, but there are about 206 bones in the skeleton. Some people have more, believe it or not. They have more ribs. I had an uncle that had 2 extra ribs. It was actually an advantage for him. He had a bigger rib cage, more lung capacity. Who knew? Anyway, okay. So you have the longest and strongest bone of the body, which is the femur. Okay. Now I'm going to move this back a little bit and move Sam back just a little bit. Okay. No, that's not helping. Okay. Anyway, you've got this femur, right? Longest, strongest bone of the body. And one thing that I do want you to, I'm going to move this again. Sorry. One thing I do want you to take note of with Sam here is this area of the femur, okay? This is the great trochanter bone of the femur, and that is very useful as far as sighting, okay? So in the standing skeleton, in the standing person, once you know where that great trochanter bone is, you know that's the midpoint of the skeleton, okay? That is the midpoint of the figure. Now, with some people, you can see that bone stick out more. With some women, you can see that stick out a bit more. But anyway, that bone there is that midpoint, which is very, very important, okay? You have the little trochanter here. You have the neck of the trochanter there. But, as far as artistic anatomy uses, that is a very useful sighting point. I'm just going to bring this up a bit. Here you can see, come on, sorry. Okay, hopefully I can figure this out. You see that little patella, obviously it's not stapled onto the leg that way. And you have the tibia and the fibula. The tibia is the larger bone, okay? The fibula is the smaller bone. And in the foot, I'm going to point this out here on this chart as well. In the lower leg, You have the tibia and the fibula. The fibula is a smaller one. The fibula is another one of those weird historical things. Um, in ancient Rome, the fibula was a piece of jewelry that was very useful. Some of them are, oh, I've seen some, and they're just beautiful. The metalworking is just gorgeous. And anyway, the fibula were used to pin together the togas because they were complicated uh, pieces of equipment there. I don't know how they did it, but anyway, the fibula is named after that pin that they used in ancient Rome. In the foot is has similar names to the hand. In the hand, it's carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. In the foot, it's tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. The difference in the foot, if I can get his leg up here in one piece. There you go, he's doing the can-can. You see this calcaneus bone right here? That's, that platform that you need to, put all your weight on and do all of your ballet moves and whatever else you're doing in a day. So that's a big difference there with the foot. It is a wedge-like shape, and as we go, we will get more into the details of these various bones. But I think I've covered the basics today. And I'm going to link you to this chart and some other things that I found that I think might be useful. And I'm really hoping to get that software going for you so that you can reference that as well. So anyway, thanks for your time. Say goodbye. You'll be saying Sam again. Okay, thanks very much.